place to be is living free in Tennessee.
Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, June 16th, 2025, and this is episode 1049 of Living Free in Tennessee, and it's a Monday show, so I get to talk about whatever I want to. And today's show is inspired by a listener from the other side of the country, I won't say specifically where, who is looking to buy homestead property, actually not that far from me, and asked me, like, if you had it to do all over again, what would you do differently? And I thought, well, I wrote back, I was like, that's actually a pretty good topic for Monday's show. And then when I sent the email out today about it being about that, somebody said, I've always wanted to hear your story about how you got from Oregon to here and all of those things. That's a different story, but it's related. And I will put that one in the queue, because I don't think I can do both today in the time that we have. We're also going to be talking about all of the usual segments we do on Monday, Tales from the Prepper Pantry, etc. And we'll get into this. What I'm going to share with you today, though, is a list of things that I would have done differently that I know for sure. I could go, it's not an all-inclusive list, but I do know that there were some things that struck me immediately. And then at the end, I'll share sort of like 5 bigger picture things that I would do if I was getting new land. This is how I would, approach that kind of a build out. I mean, that being said, there is a plug and play homestead available in Manchester for $450,000. That's a 3-acre one, so it's not a big one, but if that's what you're looking for and that's in your price range, you should go figure that one out. It's like literally ready to go. You probably could buy her livestock from her, and the systems are all set up already. So anyway, before we jump into the first main topic, or the first Monday topic of today's show, I do want to talk about our featured event, and that's the June 29th Meetup in Rabbit Processing. That's Sunday at 1 p.m. here at the Holler Homestead. We'll have potluck from 1 to 2 p.m., and then we will show you how we process rabbits here. We're not doing it as a paid class because, well, we don't really think we're rabbit processing experts. We just know how to do it, if that makes sense. Like, I've done a lot of chickens. I haven't done that many rabbits. I've done 0 rabbits, actually. I've done 1 rabbit. So the boys usually do the rabbits. They're teaching the class. And if you want to do some hands-on stuff, then you can. RSVP if you're going to come, though, because we're trying to keep this one to 20 people for the demo, just because of logistics of being able to see what's going on. But actually, if more people come for the potluck and then just sort of hang out, that's fine. We're opening up our doors so you can check out stuff while you're here as well. I expect it'll be hot. We may have, the iced coffee and the iced tea again as a result of that. I also have 2 sponsors to thank today. The first one is discountmylarbags.com. Check out what they have to offer online. They have a little less up than usual, which I believe has something to do with the tariff wars. But check them out, discountmylarbags.com. Why spend more on high-quality Mylar bags than you need to? Also, they have other food preservation and those sorts of food storage solutions that you can check out. Discountmylarbags.com. Our second sponsor of today's show is Agrist Tax Advice. Wow. I just by accident put him on as a sponsor today. And under Operation Independence, I have a tax announcement. So anyway, Matthew Sursley from agristaxadvice.com helps you analyze where your money's coming from, talk about business structures that can help you take advantage of the tax code so you keep more of your money in your pocket in a perfectly legal way. He also talks to you about how to track those things and, any risks associated with any particular write-offs. Check him out at agristaxadvice.com. Go to agristaxadvice.com/LFTN if you want to get a downloadable tax informational packet and get on his email list. I find his emails very helpful. He usually keeps it to one topic. They're about once a week, but not always once a week. And it's always something relevant to what I'm doing here. So I actually really like that email because of that. It's not like every day, 3 times a day. It's like once a week, done. That fits well with my personality. With that, it is time for our first topic of today's show, and that's Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. I actually busted out one of my, at the SOE party this weekend, I busted out one of my pickle relish jars, and I heard feedback from Amanda that they really liked the pickle relish. So it's actually on my list today. I'm hoping to score some more cucumbers because my cucumber plants are about 8 inches tall now, so they're not doing cucumbers yet. I need cucumbers to do the pickle relish, but I want to make a lot more of that because that pickle relish is delicious on hot dogs or whatever you want to use pickle relish on. But it's also like you can take your deviled eggs yolks. You can throw a tablespoon of that in, some salt, some mayonnaise, some mustard, pepper, stir that up, and you're done. If you want the horseradishy flavor, you need to add horseradish. But it's one of my tricks to saving time in the kitchen when I'm doing deviled eggs, to not have to run around and get all these different things and slice up the pickles and blah, blah, blah. And it's just done. It's like jar, done. And people are always happy with deviled eggs, and they're super easy to make. But sometimes it feels like a big chore when you have to cut up everything in tiny little pieces. Everything's cut up in tiny little pieces in that jar. So I am hoping to score cucumbers this week for that. And it says it's also sugar-free. My recipe is sugar-free if you're talking about mine. It is, yeah, it's not a sweet pickle relish. It is a dill pickle relish. I do not add sugar to it. I don't add sugar to a lot of things. There is sugar in the Aunt Helen's pickled beet recipe, but not my pickled beet recipe. I usually do both kinds. I've only canned Aunt Helen's beets this year so far. It started out strong with the beets, and I just harvested the rest of my beets today. So what I've mostly canned at this point are the pickled beets. And I'm trying to get as many as possible because with our new structure here starts with lunch. Oh, zucchini relish, delicious. Yeah. Well, also my pickle relish has no sugar in it. So anyway, we eat breakfast at 10. We have lunch at 2, and that's usually any random charcuterie, leftovers from the fridge, sliced up things, pickled things. I'm going through more pickled things since we started that, and then we do dinner 6 to 6:30. Having those benchmarks in the day at a specific time every day, no matter what, has really helped us get our shit together better on the homestead. I'm just saying. So just as a random aside, I did dry a fresh batch of lemon balm thanks to a very special visitor who brought me a beautiful harvest of lemon balm, which saved me from having to crawl down the wall in the pond to get our lemon balm. So I've got tons of lemon balm now dried for tea. And then I'm testing a new approach to event food and pre-made meals. So I'm moving to, so I've always used those aluminum disposable restaurant pans that you get at the quarter sheets you get at Sam's Club or whatever. And I wash them, so I don't just use them and throw them away necessarily unless they're ruined. Well, I finally was like, okay, I don't really want the aluminum exposure. And over the last 10 years, I've reduced a little bit of time exposure to things that could cause me harm. And aluminum is on the list this year. How can I use less aluminum? And so I realized I can buy stainless steel restaurant quarter sheet pans. The reason I use those aluminum ones, guys, is because they're exactly the right size for me and shape, and they're deep enough. And a lot of the pans I get at the store aren't deep enough. And finally, I was like, I got deeper ones than even those. But yeah, so we've started using those. And I even got 1/3 sheets. I got even smaller ones. Those are really cool. They come with, you can buy them with lids. So then I don't need to put the tin foil on top. I can just put the lid on there, throw it in the oven. If it's a casserole, done. So I'm super excited. We experimented with that over the weekend for some meatloaf stuff, and it worked really well, and they're very easy to clean. So it ticks all my boxes. So from a pantry standpoint, what that means is having a set of those means I don't need to keep storing a reusable, restorable tinfoil package, right? So that's going to hopefully long-term impact my budget. And those restaurant pans are not that expensive. I spent $60 and I got a bunch, and I can throw them in the freezer with the lid on. I can do all sorts of different things with them. I'm super excited about it. So anyway, I'm trying to stay ahead of the need for the things to come back out of the pantry as we fill up the pantry at this time of year. We don't have a shopping report today. I'm sure I'll get one right after this podcast, which happens. Next up, we have the frugality tip. This is where we talk about saving money. This one's from me. A little weekly effort goes a long way to save you tons of money in convenience food over time. Yep, that's right. I've been making 8 pounds of meatloaf at a time. And 8 pounds is the number I figured out works for this particular process. I could go up to 10, but 8 just works. And here's why I've been doing that. So when meatloaf is on the agenda for the meal plan for the week, rather than just make one meatloaf, I do 8 pounds worth, which for me turns into 4 meatloafs about. They're about 2-pound meatloafs. And then I shape and freeze the ones we're not going to eat that night for future easy to grab and cook meals. And about once a week, I choose to do that with something that I'm cooking. So if it's chili, I make extra or whatever. So, or blanching and freezing broccoli because I'm going to cook broccoli and I got it fresh at the market and I bought all the broccoli at the market. So I'm cooking some, steamed broccoli tonight, and then I'll blanch the rest of it and freeze it so that I have frozen broccoli that's like regeneratively grown organic broccoli from my location, right? Making carnivore pizza crusts. If I make one crust, I make 4 crusts usually. So I do this because I can do this once a week. It takes about 15 extra minutes of meal prep to do it. And I end up with a library in my freezer of things that are convenience foods. And here's what I mean by convenience food. When we get into the part of the year where I'm super busy, which y'all know starts around September, where I just get over the top busy all the way through the rest of the year, it's harder to spend an hour or two doing meal prep every day or every other day, right? Or even just half a day on Sunday to make the whole week easy. So what happens at that time of year is we call it the cauliflower pizza crust ripcord, or the takeout ripcord, right? You get busy, you're like, dinner, and then you order out or you get things at the store that are easy to reheat that cost a lot more money. If you do what I do, which is spend an extra 15 minutes once a week, doubling up on something and getting it organized in your freezer, all you're doing is taking something. It just takes no time, right? So at the beginning of the day, I think, meatloaf, grab a meatloaf, defrost it, throw it in the oven at the right time. Dinner's ready. And for that kind of a meal, that took me maybe 5 minutes to do. So that 15 minutes saves me a whole bunch of time later when I get so busy that I'm not spending that extra 15 minutes every week. So when life gets busy, I can pull out, cook, and serve faster than driving into town or getting takeout meat or whatever. Bijarino says, yep, I make taco meat out of ground turkey or beef and shape it into a brick and then vacuum seal it. I throw the brick in the fridge the night before I want it. Yeah, exactly. Same thing. It's, this week I pulled taco meat, which was in a tiny little package, and I pulled a half chicken that had been cooked, smoked, and put in the freezer unused. And I shredded that out and just heated them together and made sort of a smoky taco meat stir fry. I actually did a 1-pot meal on that. So that was extra cool because I didn't use as many dishes. And it was super fast and super easy. I love having those pre-made low quality or high quality things. When you buy the stuff at the store, a lot of times it's lower quality, not as nutritionally dense. So the other benefits, like you save money in 2 ways. One, you don't buy the more expensive convenient food, which if you're going to do it, buy that rather than go out to the restaurant, right? If you're keeping the budget under control, because usually the convenience food at the store is less than the restaurant. But then 2, you don't have the future medical bills from all of the preservatives and things that are in the food because you've kept your ingredients whole. So it's kind of a way for me to keep eating on plan as well. And when I eat on plan, I'm mentally sharper. I feel better. I'm more likely to do my 4 o'clock workout and all of those things. So there you go. Next up, we have Operation Independence, where we talk about Nicole's taxes. That's what I said. Agra's Tax Advice is our sponsor today. And I finished my taxes. I had everything done. I had it on my list last week to finish. I had everything done except for one piece of information I could not find. So I have one more round of other tax things to do for a different reason, but I'm officially caught up, and then I'm going to be ahead of the game when I do the next round. And I don't, by finish my taxes, I mean, it's to my accountant. But that one piece of information, I was like, how is it possible I don't have this piece of paper? It was mortgage interest. And the thing is, I paid my mortgage off last year. And so I was like, man, I can't just log in because they shut off my online access to everything. So I had to call them. I called them, and the reason I didn't get it is that if you make under a certain amount every year, if you pay less, they don't send you the form. So I was under that line, and I was like, but it's still a tax write-off. So how much is it? And then they sent me copies of my last statement, so I have the documentation. So that was cool. So like all day, this is like the eating the frog thing. All weekend, I'm thinking I'm going to have to call this particular lender. I'm going to have to somehow navigate their onerous phone system. I'm going to have to get a person. And that's hard when you don't have an active account. And then they're going to have to like get me the thing, and then I have to wait for it to be mailed here. And it's really stupid. Maybe they'll tell me the number of over the phone so I can give it to my accountant, but it's really stupid. I'm going to have to wait like 2 stupid weeks for a stupid piece of paper to finish my stupid taxes. So that was my attitude about it. And I did pray on that. Like, please, please help me get my financial ducks in a row better. I will take the steps you tell me to take just to get, like stuff like that. So anyway, I made the call. It's like first thing this morning. The minute they're open, I'm making this call just so I eat the frog. I get the frog eaten. I sit on the hold and all of that. No, straight to a person, immediately solved my problem, gave me the numbers. Documents came in email, right? Not into, not even having to wait for the mail. I had made it into a much bigger problem than it was. So, and that's why we eat the frogs, guys, right? You do the hard thing, do the thing you don't want to do. Like Joel Salatin says, if there's something that's been on your mind that you think you should do, that's probably the most important thing to do, which is why I've been so focused on finances and taxes, because it's been on my mind. It's been distasteful. I haven't been doing it. That usually means it's the most important thing. And it's helping me move forward on the projects that we are, like the big changes we're making here. Like it's stupid, like sitting there in the afternoon on Sunday doing paperwork is what is making today easier for totally different reasons or whatever. So actually it was Friday I did that, not Sunday. So anyway, that's Operation Independence. So like having that finished takes it off my plate, but also from a local ongoing revenue standpoint, keeping more of my money in my pockets requires tracking things and documenting things. And keeping more of my money in my pocket means filing my taxes on time so I get the money for the return if there is a return, so the government doesn't keep my money. Because if you fall behind, they'll keep your money if you fall behind enough. Like they could owe you $6,000 and you could be like, well, I don't get it because I never filed for them to give that to me. So they'll keep it. But you can guarantee that you're going to get a big old fine if you file late and owe them money. But they won't take it out of the $6,000 that they owe you, right? They don't actually owe me $6,000. That's a hypothetical. But I did really. It's like if you go more than I think 2 years, then you don't get anything if you file your return. Then you're just required to file it so they know that it's done. So I've learned a lot about this because I went down a very bad not keeping track of things well enough as I go from a maintenance standpoint. And what I learned from that is you just need to do it as you go. And, falling behind a month is okay, but falling behind 6 months is not okay because then you can't do the reports and then you can't get it to them. So it's been a whole, it's been a big lesson for me about profitability of my projects when I don't keep up on that little the part I hate the most, which is the tracking of the things. I don't have the insight, so I don't make the best decisions, first of all. And secondly, I end up in a situation where it just takes a lot of my time and it's a big bother, right? So part of this is just reprogramming myself to realize we're more prosperous here if I keep up on that, even though I hate doing it. It's just it's like I've built the life I want, except for that piece. And that piece, if you outsource it completely, doesn't outsource well, or it opens you up for fraud. One of the pieces of advice somebody gave me about starting your business is, even if you have somebody else doing all your bookkeeping and all of those things for you, go through item by item once a month for everything and look for anything that looks suspicious, because if you don't do that, somebody will slide something by you eventually if you get the wrong person in the wrong role, right? So that was somebody running a much larger company than my company who gave me that. Okay. It's time for the main topic of today's show, the real reason you turned in. We're 19 minutes in. If I could turn back time, if I could find a way. That's right. The question is, if I could go back in time to the beginning of my homestead and know now, like know then what I know now, what would I do differently? And this came from Ian, who's about to probably buy a homestead. And he's going to do a big move from another climatic zone. So that's an important piece of information to know, which I did do when I went from Oregon to here. And he's just saying, like, what are your lessons learned? What do I need? Because I'm going to be building out my homestead for the first time. And I don't know what I don't know. Like, what would you do differently? And I thought rather than just say, these are the 5 things I would say, like positive, no, I'm going to take you to my dark place. I did a lot wrong on this homestead to learn how to do things right on this homestead. And 18 years ago, when I came out here, I wasn't planning the homestead. Like, that's not why I moved here. And then somebody's saying, LFTN, I think I know you. That's how you get my attention, Tommy or Tammy, is you put it in all caps. You might know me. I don't know. I go to the farmer's market all the time. So there you go. And if you're near me, then you probably know me, because I think it's important to know people. Anyway, I did a lot wrong. And we, like 18 years ago, I think YouTube may have existed, but it wasn't heavily used. I can't remember. I know that I was getting most of my information from books and blogs and old timey books and talking to people who lived here at that time. And I didn't even know I wanted to have a homestead out here. I just wanted to be near the lake so I could go swim in the lake. And I wanted to be away from the city because the city had become painful for me. So, in fact, when we bought this originally, we lived in Nashville and this was the weekend getaway. It's just within 6 months, I was like, I would rather live out there with no running water than here. And so we moved out here. And so we're going to talk about all the things I did wrong. So I bought this homestead and it was trashed. It had somebody die in the house, and then it passed on to somebody else who was married here and then had a really nasty divorce. And then a third couple lived here who moved out when I bought the house. And between all of those 3 households, all of that stuff was still here. And I'm pretty sure some stuff from before the person who built my house was here from the original homestead cabin that was up on the hill. So there was just a lot here. And as I started living out here, I realized that it was my connection to be able to get organically grown, delicious food meant that I needed to grow my own food because I couldn't find it to buy. Not that it was not available, but it took me a number of years to figure out where in the county that was available. So it's really fun. So the first thing I learned about it, and it was a lot of work. Like, I worked, dawn to dusk. I had a full-time job, traveling all over. I'd be out of town. I'd come back. I'd get off the plane. I'd go straight to work in the garden or whatever, right? Okay, so there was that. And that's the first thing I did wrong. Make it fun more often from the beginning of your homestead. Your homestead development journey should be a good time. You should make it fun, not work. Make it fun, not painful. Painful things will happen and work will happen. But if you go in with the attitude of this is fun and I'm going to find ways to make it fun, you're going to be in a much better place when those things go wrong. By which I mean, I know Joel Salatin, from the time he and his wife started trying to make Polyface farms, plural, profitable, one of the things they did is they raised the pasture-raised chickens. And they would process them all. And processing day meant he got up super early and started the scalder warming up. And then she got up and then they did all these things in the morning. And then they processed and packaged the chickens. It was a lot of work. Sold them to whoever they needed to sell them to. And then at the end of that, they still had the farm to take care of, right? And then they celebrated by having an ice cream. And at that time, they were trying not to have any expenses at all so that they had a better chance to make money on their farm to turn it profitable so he could do this full time for the rest of his life. And so that one little ice cream may not seem like a lot of money, but that was their luxury item that day. And they made it like they got to look forward to the ice cream, not just like the hard work of processing the birds. So that's what I mean by make it fun. Or this year, I I had to pull a baby in the middle of the night from one of our ewes, and we thought there were two in there, and we were out in the pasture at like 1:30 or 2 in the morning. And it was lucky for me that that was not a super cold night. So it was actually a fairly pleasant night. It wasn't raining for once. It wasn't windy. Moon was full. It was beautiful at the top of the pasture. Quite comfortable, actually. And Tactical jumped on the four-wheeler. He went down the hill and he made an herbal tea and brought it up. And we had hot tea together in the pasture waiting for the second baby. So that made it more fun, because otherwise you're just sitting out there like, it's beautiful, but whatever. So find little ways. It's like little things. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money to make it fun. And you'll have a much better time, even when what you need to do is eat a frog. And, this morning we scooped wood chips from down the road, brought them up here and put them in a pile because we're moving a pile, but we don't have a tractor. So I was like, okay, 2 days this week at 7:30 in the morning, we're going to go down there and take a load of wood chips up. And it was raining for part of it. And I had fun doing it. It was work, but I had fun doing it in part because two of us were doing it together. So that's the other thing, is something that's like that. When you take that on by yourself with a podcast on, that's how I get that done. That's why I listen to podcasts, guys, is I've done all this homestead stuff. Just find ways to make it fun, and then find time to appreciate what you've accomplished and enjoy it, because that's why you're doing this. If I could have, I would have both. If I knew then what I know now, this house that I'm sitting in right now, coming to you over the internet on, would have been bulldozed. And I would have built a brand new house, one piece at a time as my budget allowed. The way I wanted the house, where the house should be. This house is like, this homestead is designed around this house. And this house is where it is and was where it was when I got here, but it's not in the right place. And I've put more money into getting the house to where it is now from a livability standpoint than I would have just building a new house. And there was a second building on the property, the guest cabin, that I could have which I did, I remodeled it. I could have moved down there while I was able to come up with the money to build the house where I would have wanted to put a house on this property with better drainage. Instead, I have started to remodel this house time after time after time, only to discover there's a huge, expensive structural problem that takes all the money of the remodel, and then I end up with a kitchen with restaurant tables instead of cabinets, for example. That's where we're at right now. I end up with drywall in one room, but not the whole house, because I had to put a retaining wall in and a French drain. So that's the deal. Jesse's asking what makes it the wrong place. The drainage issue primarily. And then from the topography of if you analyze this property for topography and from a permaculture lens and the hydrology of the place, you would move this house. So, but once the house is there, right, that's called a type 1 error, when you put your house in the wrong place. And most people do, because they come in and decide where the buildings go before they know how the water moves on their property. And when you know how the water moves, that actually informs a lot of things about how you're going to do grazing and all sorts of different things. So Matthew says, still need to change that Frankenstein of a disconnect. Yep. Just let me know when you want to come out, buddy. We're ready anytime, but you're busy. And it's not worth like interrupting your flow for that right now. We'll do it when we do in the next big thing here, probably. So I would. And then the other thing about this house is it was never the kind of house I would like to live in. So I don't even like my house that's basically remodeled now. I like things about my house. And I don't hate my house, but I don't like it. It doesn't let enough natural light in for me. And I get a lot of natural light by going outside, but it's funny that I've been here for 18 years in a house I don't like, but I love my land. So, location. Well, yeah, if I would have just bulldozed this, it would have cost me less money, and I would have the house I want where I want it. And I don't even want, guys, a particularly luxurious house. It would probably be about the same number of square feet as this house. It's just that it would be a different design. I would not have gotten so good at the third thing. I would never have gotten so good at developing emotional attachments to goats. I brought goats on this property and I got them as little cute babies to eat back the weeds because we didn't even know what we had here. It was a thicket and they did a great job of that. And they were needed for about 2 years to get that done. And then what should have happened to those goats is they got processed or sold to somebody else because I was not setting up a goat dairy here. Instead, what I have are 2 pet goats who I really like, who are just here. And they cost me money. And right now they're in fact eating through a thicket that I just needed them to eat through. But in general, I have pet goats. I have pet goats I don't even spend all that much time with. But it is what it is. And it's because I allowed myself to get emotionally attached and very bonded to one of them. And she behaves really well around me because of that. But I'm not emotionally ready to do anything except for if anybody wants to adopt 2 goats to eat the land at their place and you have the infrastructure and you're not just going to turn them into meat, let me know because I got 2 goats who are pet goats. Also, I might not have gotten goats now that I've had sheep. So I got the goats because everybody told me I needed to get goats, and sheep do the same thing mostly. So there's that. I may not have even gotten goats. And actually, the sheep are part of the long-term plan, and they are not temporary animals here. They're not temporary livestock. Goats are. Sheep are helping us maintain the land and build the soil. I would have moved the existing garden plot from zone 2 to zone 1. The garden was already somewhere here when I moved here. And they have, it was actually zone 1 for where the original homesteader cabin was, which is where I would put the house if I was going to put the house anywhere on this property. So we'll start there. And it would have been, then I wouldn't have had to move the garden. But being that I'm in this house and my garden was somewhere I never go on the property, I had years of good garden where I was really disciplined about getting my butt out there. I tried to redesign how the livestock were so I'd have to walk past the garden. And the fact of the matter is I never walked there unless I made the conscious decision to walk there. In contrast, I have moved my garden to zone 1 as of this year. So let's just say it took me 17 years of trying to fight with the stupid location of the stupid garden because the stupid garden was in the stupid wrong place on the day I moved into this stupid property, right? I moved my garden to zone 1 and it's already doing way better. I've had good years and bad years with it in the other place, but I just walked by it. So then I'm like, oh, there's fire ants. Kill them with orange oil. Oh, the beets are ready. I harvested beets this morning at 6 a.m. because I was like, oh, looks like it's time to get those all the way out. So I took the beets all the way out. Took me 10 minutes. I was out there anyway with my coffee, hanging out. Wow, having your garden where it should be makes a huge difference about success now, doesn't it? And it makes it fun. Point 1. Okay, the retaining wall. The infamous, my house is built into the side of a hill, has a drainage problem. The reason it has a drainage problem is the way they built it into the side of the hill. It like drains down and then it jogs up. And then where it jogs up, it's a stream. It goes under my house. I have fixed that finally. It cost me a lot of money to fix that. I didn't know why I was getting all these rot problems until we dug down to the foot of the house, on the back of the house. I dug on the other side, though, because water was pouring in on that wall as well. That doesn't have that problem. All I did there was put in a retaining wall and add a French drain. And when I put the retaining wall in, the contractor who helped me was like, what would look really cool, Nicole, is if we took these railroad ties and we made this really cool crisscross pattern. And I said, yeah, you're right. That'd look cool. We did it. It made his job easier too because he didn't have to do a big single wall. That was a maintenance nightmare for many years because every one of those crisscrosses had to be maintained and planted with something. And I don't use Roundup, and we have Tennessee weeds here. And I created a maintenance nightmare by making a decision visually only without thinking about what it would take to keep it looking nice. It needed to be an easy maintenance design first. And this is when we put in my food forest. That was the first question Nick asked me was, how many hours a month are you putting in on this? And I said 2 hours a year. And that tracks, by the way. I have paid Carrie to come out and do my food forest maintenance for me. So it is more than 2 hours a year. But I think 16 hours a year probably on the food forest is about what it needs right now. And I could put more time in and it would be more, more luxuriously maintained, but that's not what I want out of it. Like, it's, I'm happy to poke around in my garden. I don't want to sit out there in the food forest messing with it. So that retaining wall and French drain system, if it had gone in with an easy maintenance design, would not have turned into the nightmare that then got ripped out again anyway. And then we put the rock wall in. So that got put in twice. The French drain went in 3 times because the first guy I hired to do it was not the right guy for the job. That's a point that we'll talk about later. I would only add 1 livestock or major thing to my homestead until it is easy to do. So 1 a year, or if maybe 2 the first year, like chickens and garden the first year, sure. Chickens, goats, sheep, ducks, rabbits the first year, no. Not unless you are a very experienced homesteader. And even then, if you were, you wouldn't do that to yourself, right? Until you know how your process works, how your day organizes out, and it goes from, hey, I'm just learning this whole new animal, to, okay, this is just like on a schedule and it's cool and I understand the warning signs of problems. That's almost every homesteader does that wrong. I say this now from experience. And believe me, I was getting information from forums online and calling people and calling veterinarian. Like I one time had a veterinarian troubleshoot a sick chicken over the phone, and I did save her. That was back when you could go get I used antibiotics on a chicken years ago. She lived. She had a cut that was like 6 inches long along her back leg, and you could see like straight up all the way down to the muscle. And I super glued it together with gaps and gave her antibiotics, and she lived. We also didn't eat her eggs for 6 months, but that's a whole nother thing. So I would say if that happened again, that would be a cull chicken for me probably. But, at the time I was still very emotionally attached to all of my livestock. Now I have learned to be emotionally attached, but separate, right? So it's like, okay, I know this is food. I need to accept that this is food and go on with my life. And I learned that from chickens. They gave me the wherewithal for that. The problem was I already had goats that were my pet goats that are not going to be, well, at this point, they're so old, you don't want to cook them anyway. Like, let's just be honest about that. Old goats, not like top quality meat. That's desperation meat right there. I would have done a hard reset on the stuff. So again, I bought this property. It had a house on it. It had a second cabin on it that wasn't built out. And it was advertised as land only. So I bought this at a land only price, but it had all that infrastructure. You know what else it had? 3 households worth of crap everywhere. You know what else it had? The greenhouse that had been on the south side of this house had been busted out. So there was broken glass everywhere and ruins of walls sticking out the front of my house that used to be the greenhouse. And it had socket sets and all sorts of interesting tools in the shrubs from the truck driver who used to live here working on his truck and then just throwing his tools. And then the Tennessee jungle took over and it was a mess. It was a mess. And that was something that many years you'd be mowing and you'd hit something and you'd be like, why is there a Sawzall here? Right? Well, here's the thing. And we call this the ghetto factor. Mess begets mess. So let's start with, when you see clutter all the time, you add to the clutter, which I do. And I did. And I went through years of trying to make myself happy by buying decorations, which cluttered up things even more, and then never putting them up or not putting them all the way up, right? And I did that because there were 3 households worth of stuff like furniture and pots and pans and like useful homestead tools. And then there was a whole bunch of crap. And I was sorting through it. So I spent years of my life in my free time. This is not fun. Sorting other people's stuff that they had already let go of by moving out. And Margot says, dude, let's talk about the clutter exploding. Oh yeah, we could do a whole show on that. And because of that, I wasted all that time. And I think I would have been better off getting a dumpster, which I did try to get the dumpster. And that's a whole nother story. But getting a dumpster and just not even looking at the stuff and throwing it all straight in the dumpster, and it probably would have been about 5 dumpsters, or hiring an auctioneer before I even moved into the property and saying, sell everything you can sell on the property. Auction it off, have a big old auction under a big old tent. Let's get rid of it all. And then I will figure it out if there was like a part that was important for the plumbing or whatever, which, in the early years when I was repairing the pump house a lot, there were some very specialty parts that I from time to time found. That was actually the good part of not getting rid of this stuff. But at the same time, I could have gone to the store and gotten it or replaced that with a less weird part. Because what happened is it was like the house of weird plumbing parts. But we'll tell that story a different time too. So that hard reset on the stuff, if you move into a place that just has a bunch of flotsam and jetsam and antiques and it's all worth something someday to somebody, like purge that shit. Like get rid of it and start with the stuff you need and acquire the stuff you need. Even if you end up buying a thing that you just got rid of, you can make the choice about which one, how it fits your system, like all of those things. You can align on one battery set, which we've done here. Like we have the DeWalt battery set here. And so we try to buy any of the battery tools DeWalt or DeWalt compatible, right? So that way anybody's charger for anybody's tools in the whole holler at this point. Well, I don't know if Lynn has DeWalt, but I know that Nighthawk does, right? We can just, I had to put my initials on my battery so I knew where they were, but we can just use anybody's charger and it's so much time saved that way. So that hard reset was a big mistake. And then it landed me in a more of a, because I'm inclined to collect things too, it landed me in a situation where I also developed more of a I'm keeping hold of stuff too much problem that I've been addressing for several years now because it does not serve what we're doing here to have all the stuff. Infrastructure before animals. So see above, right? Maybe not get goats without a goat pasture and a way to keep them fenced in. Maybe not get chickens before you have a way to keep your chickens safe from predators. I lost 40 baby chickens once to a poorly made chicken tractor, and the neighbor's dog was dubbed the worst chicken mom in the county that year. So that was done wrong. So, when you do one animal at a time, you can do the infrastructure, get the animal in, learn whatever infrastructure you need to deal with, because that's going to happen. And then you aren't losing your mind. If you do know that long-term you want several kinds of livestock, though, you can plan whatever, the barn or whatever you're going to build with that in mind. So, yeah. Bijarino says, yeah, my clutter of jerky business stuff and canning stuff was drowning me. It can do that. I'm so glad that Hollow Roast Coffee is in its own building and not in my house, because I can't even. A, I have animals in my house and I do not have animals in the roasting shack. But B, just imagine all that stuff in here too. I don't ever want to go there. So, yeah. The other thing I would have done differently is, rather than starting to build out all this stuff on year one, I would have stopped and slowed my roll and gone through a year of observing how the property is. I would have done some minimal stuff. Like I probably would have done chickens in the garden and then just temporary structure for the chickens. Or actually there was already a chicken coop, a duck coop, really, that I could use. And just put them there and put the garden where the garden was in the wrong place and observe the property and how it went. So that I would know how the water moves, how much water comes out of the sky, how the seasons change. Because I was coming at this from an Oregon perspective, and Tennessee is a very different environment. So if you can take that time on the property to observe the seasons and everything, great. And if you are going to put stuff up, put up temporary fencing or temporary infrastructure for your livestock if you're starting with livestock. If you're building a house, pay a consultant to save you hundreds of thousands of dollars by putting your house in the right place and not the wrong place. And if you're going to do that, find one that has permaculture knowledge and hydrological knowledge, like how the water moves, right? They can look at a topographical map and be like, ooh, if you put the house there, all the water ends up there too. That's a bad spot. But an architect might be like, I think the house should go here because it would look so cool in that, nestled in that little valley between all three. You know what I'm saying? So that's that's where, you got to really put some time. It's better to put money up front on a consultant than to have to deal with a stream under your house, which is what I had to deal with, right? The next one's a big one. Oversee contractors and helpers more closely. And this goes back to the beautiful retaining wall. Had I really thought about that, that wouldn't have happened. But also, I've had situations where I'm like, put gutters on the house, hire the guy to do gutters, and the gutters that go on the house drain the wrong direction. I've built a French drain here. I want it to go in the French drain there. It's draining on the other side. And I think we agreed. We verbally did it. We even wrote it down, and somehow the wrong thing gets done. And that's happened a lot. Or I hired the wrong person and they don't do very good work. I've had that happen too. And if I would have just slowed my roll, and like the reason you hire somebody is you don't want to do the work. But at this point, when I hire somebody to do the work, I'm here. 2 reasons for that. 1, I can observe if I think they're actually good at what they're doing, if I somehow didn't check references well enough, and I can put a stop to it. You have to be brave and just put a stop to it in that situation. And 2, they can ask me questions that will inevitably come up, and I can clarify what I mean. So there are a couple people I've worked with enough now that I don't have to be here all the time. Like Ken Esch comes out. He does great work, does high quality work. I never have to worry about it. But inevitably, when he works on something here, we think we understand what's happening, and then he gets into it, and then my house is weird, and he has to make a decision. And if I'm not here, he's going to make his decision the way he'd make it, not necessarily the way I'd make it. And it's no skin off his, it's not that anyone's worse than the other, but an example of this is Taj Mahaler. I was here when Taj Mahaler went in. I was very sick. And he went to put the posts in, and he's like, hey, there's going to be this like weird 10-inch gap between where this post is and the side of your house, because otherwise I have to go through the roof. And I was like, go through the roof. And to him, he's like, why would you put a hole in your roof, right? Well, I'm like, well, because I'm really going to hate that 10-inch gap a lot. That's what I know. And so he did, and it's great. And had he done it the other way, I wouldn't have been mad if I hadn't been home, but I was home. And the reason I was there for that, it was a big project, and I wanted to make sure I could answer like little questions like that could come up. So, there's a couple reasons to oversee contractors and helpers. I've had helpers come to weed my garden and pull out my entire dill patch thinking it was a weed. So things you think are easy to explain that you've explained are not necessarily explained clearly. And if you're not there to double check until you know the person, you just got to be there. You don't have to be a jerk about it, but you just kind of have to be aware of what's up. I would build with profit in mind. I did not build with profit in mind originally, and we had to go back and redo all that. And one thing, like getting your tractored chicken system up, can generate income to pay for the next thing, like getting the electric fencing you need to rotate your sheep. So and I say this even if you're not selling your stuff and you're just doing it to replace your food, you should be building with profit in mind, meaning that you are now not having to buy the chicken. So that's saving you enough money to do the next thing. But even better, look at how you can feed your surplus into the market and make some money on that. Because homesteads can be profitable. It takes work. And if it's not what you want to do full time, then you have to think about that. But you always should have an eye on the finance part and the money part. My biggest lesson over the last couple of years. This one's a big one, and I could have done it on week 1 and been done with it. Addressed the negative energy issue on my property. This was where we go into the spiritual world, guys. There was some yuck here. There was a nasty divorce here. There was a man who died in my house. There was something else here that was very disruptive and evil. And most of the time I didn't notice it was here, but every so often I noticed it was here. I noticed it was here from year 1. And I smudged. I did all sorts of different things. And we didn't really get rid of that until we had the property blessed in 2020. And then it was gone. And from that time on, things went better here. And I had created a lot of not better. And some of that was that disruptive thing that was there. So even if you don't know if something disruptive is there, if you're new to a property, address the energy issue, set it up for success for yourself. It's not hard to do. And for me, it's a maintenance thing. It's an ongoing maintenance thing that's happening probably about once a month here that we continue to work on that. Yeah, DFW says, wish I'd known. Well, by the time you were here, DFW, we had addressed the issue, except for we had some of it come back this year and it's currently not here. But it, it's a diligence issue as well. But when we addressed that issue, it's like everything opened up for us. And that was a big deal. And I think you don't understand the emotional toll that has on you when you're constantly exposed to it or constantly fighting something. So that's a big issue. I would have made better use of on-site resources. I had a lot of money early on from my job, and I used money to buy problems away. And then when I bought the problems away, somebody else did it differently than I wanted it done. And then, there we go. So that was one thing. But also, we burned a lot of resources here. We would cut trees down and burn them in a big bonfire or in the wood stove. At least we got heat out of that. But junk trees, that like the tree of heaven that's here, that's not a tree you're putting in your fireplace unless you're desperate. So Tactical's been on a tear about getting the junk trees out of here. And when he takes one of those down, and you guys are going to think like tree of heaven, oh no, he makes sure it's not replanting itself. So he's not just putting it in a way that roots, but he'll pile the trees up in a way that adjusts the water flow to keep more of the soil, because we have an erosion issue that's part of the long-term plan is ameliorating that issue. So he's used them as material to adjust slightly the shape of the land so that more of the water stays, and so it slows down and runs off without the topsoil with it, basically. That's the plan. So it still ends up in the creek, or some of it soaks into the soil, but basically that's what he's done to start changing the shape. And if you come here and you haven't been here in like 5 years, you'll see a huge difference because of this and the grazing. And you don't know, like trees are resources, wild edible plants are resources. If you walk in and you have a big old elderberry patch that's just there, you've got an elderberry syrup business that will make you money immediately every fall when you launch it and start selling your expensive quart jars of elderberry syrup locally. It's just like people buy that stuff and it's gone, as long as you market it. So you don't even know what on-site resources you have. But if you start assessing your on-site resources, you'll know what it is. It's just like the Third Day Water folks, right? The Third Day Beverage Company. They have an amazing spring that doesn't need any water treatment at all. And it's coming out in voluminous amounts off their property. And they are now bottling that water, and they have a line of electrolyte beverages as well. That they have monk fruit for sweetener, not sugar. And they don't have food coloring that are not natural. Like if it's red, it's going to be beet juice that made it red, I believe. Or, I don't know for sure about what it is or what the color, but their whole mission is to provide a healthier product and give people access to healthy water. And water, when we treat it at the city water level, is less healthy than that water. And you can argue with me all you want, but I don't buy that drinking chlorine is good for me. And that's a thing, right? So you don't know what your resources are till you're there necessarily, but use them. Don't lose them. Don't just, piss them away and give them to other people if you can use them there. If you're giving them to people because you want to help people, that's fine. But that's, it's a decision you make. When Tactical started putting the junk trees around, the other thing that popped up on the property was morel mushrooms. I'd been here years looking for morels. All of a sudden we have a morel patch. So There you go. Yeah, BJ says not just chlorine, fluoride. In some municipalities, yeah, you have fluoride. So then morels are another resource you can sell for a lot of money. And I've got them growing on my property. How cool is that? Because somebody put junk trees down on the ground. Some of the junk trees must have been oak. Or oak branches. Yeah. The next thing would have been I would have put a lot more time and thought into my soil development, getting good compost, and making the microbiology of the soil way healthier. In only a year and a half of really concentrating on that, or I guess we've been concentrating through grazing, we've been concentrating on that for 3 or 4 years, but I added the bioreactor compost, which is way better quality than the compost I make other ways. It just has a lot more soil life, and that soil life results in a lot faster progress. And I even started going down this path in 2017, and then I didn't follow through, right? I should have done that first. I should have done that in year 1 and year 2. All I should have really concentrated on was that. And if that meant that there were grazing animals here, sure. And if that meant that I was having some gardening going on, sure. But basically, that was the most important thing I could have done for the homestead out of the chute. And that's what sets the foundation for everything. I'm not going to say it's number one, but it's number 2. Because number 1 is getting your hydrology right, which is where the water goes. Like understanding where it goes and integrating into that. You know, when you do a permaculture design, you're looking at water and access first. But the soil is third. The soil is third. The other thing is, and this is really hard to know, I should have bulldozed the house, but I should not have massively upgraded the well water system. Because after it was upgraded, then it changed what was needed. Because after I'd been here for a while, it was like, oh, this is how the water system needs to be. And then I ended up burying pipes. Well, I buried pipes twice here because the first time I just put them where they were, but new pipes. And I could have spent the same money and rerouted it so I had a gravity-fed system that would have been more resilient in times of power being out, because stupid me, when I did this, didn't think about the fact that you need power to get the water to the house, because the power hardly ever went out when I was first here. So now, you know, it's fine. It's been changed, but it is what it is. Oh, I love it when this happens. Sometimes I get signed out of my show notes, and that totally just happened. So I'm going to talk about, and the thing is, the stupid sign is like right in front of the document I'm reading. So irritating. So anyway, the water system would have been something I did. Now I have a question I saw that I'm going to answer. You said we bought the homestead, then the tactical's not been there for that long. Did you purchase the property on your own? How was running a property solo versus a team? Okay, so I had a romantic partner, and he left in 2019, and we bought it together, and I bought him out of the property when he left, and I was always more running the homestead than he was. He did help with the animals. He kept firewood going. But running a homestead by yourself. So if the question is, can I run a homestead by myself? The answer is yes. If you're going to run a homestead by yourself, what you need to do is think about the fact that you're running the homestead by yourself. And it helps if you have good community around you, so you can sometimes leave town. Even if it's like mom comes in and house sits, or sister comes in and house sits, or whatever. But you absolutely can do it. Set up systems so they are built for you. And by which I mean, if you're a small stature person, then don't build things for large stature persons. Likewise, if you're a large stature person, don't build a super short coop you have to duck and go into every time. So you want to set it up functionally for you and in ways that you can lift stuff and that sort of thing. Because like what I know as a woman who was doing most of the homestead stuff by herself most of the time, is that things like lifting feed bags was at the edge of my physical capacity early on. That was 50 pounds, right? If I could have had a 25-pound feed bag, I would have been like in for that. And I had to A, work up muscle, and B, figure out how to leverage my particular lower center of gravity to do things. And sometimes your lower center of gravity keeps you from tipping over, but sometimes it gets you stuck inside that barrel you had to climb into to get it set up as a pig feeder. And then because you have a tire on the outside, you can't tip it over to get out. So you have to figure out how to climb out. And if you don't have the upper body strength, you see what I'm saying? Like there are things that functionally male versus female, our bodies do differently because our center of gravity is different. And that can make a big difference. Also, I bought smaller batteries for my DeWalt tools so I didn't have to hold a drill over my head heavier. That's just what, those are some of the things I did. But you can absolutely build out a homestead. You're going to just think about it for yourself and how that needs to look. And also with the idea of how can I turn this into a standard operating procedure or a written down SOP for somebody to come in and take over when I'm not here. And that when I'm not here is really important. You want to have the relationships for that. You may not have them right now, but you can develop them so that if you have to go to the hospital for something for a day or two or a week or whatever, it's easy for somebody to run it. Automate where you can, but don't automate without checking because sometimes automations fail. So there, like there's a lot of ways to do it. I know lots of people running homesteads by themselves, and it's, you know, they've just made the choices that work for how they work is sort of the end result of that. Okay. This next one's probably one of the most important things. I did not learn from the local community regarding what grows well here, how the hydrology works, which is really important in Tennessee, and I'll tell you why in a second, and other local knowledge until I was here for a number of years. Therefore, I came in with my Oregon perspective and planted the wrong varieties of things, the wrong kinds of things at the wrong month. And I was, you know, kind of looking at a chart and looking at Oregon, and we're in a zone, and I figured out my zone, and I called the extension office. I tried, and they were like, our last frost date is, I don't know. That's basically what they told me. They gave me a date, and they gave me another date, and they said, but we really don't know. And I got really frustrated with that. Here's the deal. I am within 10 miles of 3 zones. So the real issue is we don't know what zone we're in. Every year it changes when it's going to be, if it's going to be a late frost year or an early frost year or a wet spring. We have a wet spring this year. It's just going to be a little different. And so when you're growing things here, what I learned is you have to sort of go a little earlier than you should and go a little later than you should and plant the same things multiple times if it's going to be outside. You can extend it, of course, with row cover and other things, but that's what I've done. And then one of those crops does well, and the rest of them I pull out if they don't look good. That's sort of what I learned from people here locally. I didn't know that we had a bunch of permaculture people in my county when I moved here. I didn't know what permaculture was. I didn't know how to tap into the local organic food market. I eventually met a single person who opened up a whole set of doors for me just by getting out and interacting with people who grow food who have the same interests as I do, by getting involved in the farmer's market. So that local knowledge was important. But I'm going to go back to the hydrology issue, by which I mean how the water moves. In Oregon, when it rains, it just kind of rains, you know, and sometimes it rains harder and sometimes like it just kind of mists, you know. If you're from there, you get what I'm talking about. It's like the gray and the mist, and you need to have sort of that delay on your windshield wipers for your car because you don't want them just on. It's too fast. And then we get reasonably hard rain. No, we don't. Not in Oregon. Not if you've lived in Tennessee. The Oregon rain is never hard compared to the rain that comes out of the sky in Tennessee. The rain that hit me this morning on my walk was harder than what's considered a hard rain. And that wasn't a particularly hard rain. So what happens here is we sometimes get multiple inches of water an hour, which is a lot of water at one time to be hitting a steep hill and going down that hill and going into the wash and going through the culvert and going under the road. And that therein lies the problem. I know a lot of people who've moved here who didn't believe their neighbors when their neighbors were like, your culvert's not big enough. If you are moving somewhere from another place and you're an old, crotchety, conventional vegetable growing Roundup spraying neighbor comes down and is like, why are you doing organic? That's dumb. That's one thing. But if he's like, why are you putting your fruit trees so low down in this holler? The frost will get them and knock them out. You should listen to him for that. He may be spraying his trees with an antifungal and all sorts of stuff that you don't approve of, but he knows what kills his trees when he puts them in the wrong place. And you can get a lot of knowledge like that by talking to people. It requires you, yes, you, the introvert, listening to me going, oh, Nicole, yeah, go out and talk to people. They love to talk about gardening and growing stuff. And the key is to withhold the judgment about how they grow stuff, right? If they ask you a question, you can say that's how you're doing it. But I learned long ago, I can learn as much from a conventional truck row gardener in this area who makes thousands of dollars every year selling corn out of the back of his truck as I can from our local regenerative network. And in particular, knowing what grows locally well is helpful. Like I tried for years with fruit trees, and I remember going into somebody who'd had, a homestead / farm for many years. And I'm like, how do you get your peaches to grow? And he was like, I buy them from Georgia. Nicole, I grow sour cherries here because that's what wants to grow here. And I grow berries here. Fruit trees don't like our springs because it's hot and then it's freezing, and then it's hot and then it's freezing. And that being said, I still have fruit trees here, and my fruit trees are not giving me any fruit. But I get berries every year. And I do have a couple cherry trees in that hopefully will give me fruit soon. They're maybe next year is the year finally. Learning from that local community is huge. If you're putting a culvert in and they tell you the culvert's too small, what they mean is next year or the year after, we're not sure when, we're going to get a crazy torrential downpour, and that's going to flood out and it's going to rip out the whole thing. That never happened to me, but we watched that happen down the road. There's a piece of property for sale that's listed higher than I think it's worth right now. But they put in these 2 cute little 6-inch plastic pipes across the dry creek area. And then they put gravel over it so you could drive over and get on the property and check it out. And I was on a walk and I'm like, tactical. They weren't there for me to tell him. Tactical. That's going to last about 2 weeks. He's like, yeah, that's gone. First rain that came, the culverts were plastic. They were down the creek. Everything was washed out because the water had risen up 2 to 3 feet and just knocked it out. So then they put it back together with the same culverts, and then they put a gate and 2 fence posts in up creek from it to slow the water down so it wouldn't take it out. All I can say is I watched that culvert get washed out probably 8 times before. It's just gone now. They just gave up. They've piled some like thick rocks there. But the deal is you need either a really high bridge over that, or you need really big culverts, and you need to keep them clean and free of brush, or that's just where the water goes when it rains. And there are all sorts of visual indicators that I can see now that I could not see 18 years ago that would make me know that here, having lived here now. But, I would have done the same darn thing had I just moved in. And the other way you can get good insights locally, take classes. If you see somebody has a class on something you already know, take it anyway. Go see if it's cheese making, canning, how to make compost, whatever, how to process sheep, how to raise sheep, how to evaluate ruminant fecal matter for parasites, whatever it takes. It's something that you can develop. You view it as developing connections, even if it's not necessarily what you need to learn. But I've actually found when I take classes on things I already know about, I learn a lot anyway. So there is that. Develop those relationships, talk to your neighbors, and then of course design hydrology, access, and then soil, and then figure out where your infrastructure goes from there. I waited 10 years to bring a permaculture consultant in for the first time on my property, and that was totally the wrong move. I should have had one in by year 2. I didn't know what permaculture was in year 2. The day I learned what permaculture is, I should have brought somebody in to talk to me about my goals, look at what we had here and say, okay, that stuff probably needs to move. If you're going to organize in zones, this is how I do it. Or, walk me through developing my own zones, however that works for them. And it would have saved me probably $20,000 to do that. and it would have cost me $1,000 or $2,000 to do it. It depends on your local market and who you have in, but I have since had multiple consultants in over time, because every time I do something big, I'm like, the hardest property to design is your own. So, we do some big things without that. Like the rock wall was not a place where we brought a permaculture consultant in, but there was a lot of drawing things on paper. Like I ran the idea by my buddy David, and he's like, this and that and this other thing would be really cool. And I was like, yep, glad I ran that by you. Having those relationships, you can tap into that, but also having somebody objectively look at your property and not care that your house is in the wrong place, or your house is where it is, and tell you it's in the wrong place. It's helpful, even if you're not going to ever move your house. If I run into one more expensive repair on this house, it's very likely it's becoming a barn, by the way, and I'm going to build my house where my house should be. It's like, it's going to be $20,000 to do that. I mean, like, I wonder how much house I can get built with the contacts I have now for $20,000. I know I probably can't build the whole house, but I bet I could get a really good start on that, and I can just suck it up on this thing here, right? So anyway, that's not even I've got so much more I could tell you I did wrong. And you're like, why do I even listen to this lady now? Well, because I do a lot of things right now, right? I do a lot of things right. I've mastered the process of tapping into seasonal plants and eating and preserving. And it's because I made those mistakes that I can do what I do now. So I just like held up my skirt and showed you my petticoat. I don't believe in not talking about your mistakes and lessons learned, because that's how I know. Like when I give advice on something, I'm coming at it from the point of view as, let me just show you all the stuff I did wrong, right? So let's break this down into what this means for you if you're just starting on your homestead, or if you're starting to reassess your existing homestead. One, start with a big picture plan, not what's already there. By which I mean, look at your whole homestead or the piece of property you're going to develop out, and have clarity on what you want it for, how you want it to work. If you have a spouse, this is a conversation between the two of you want to agree on before you start working on it, so you're not building opposite things. And that can unearth a lot of what a person wants. During that conversation, you need to be honest about what you want, though. So, for example, knowing that I'm not going to spend hours every week in my food forest changed the design of my food forest completely. And it's more of an orchard than a food forest, really, because of some of that. And sometimes what's already there is already there, and you're not going to move it, like my house. But actually, had I had a better set of advisors assess the structure of this house, it would have been clear that it should be a barn and I should build a house. And that the way to get there would have been to finish the cabin, the guest cabin, move into that, and then save the money to build up the hill and just let this be what it is, which is, a barn, a really nice barn, but it's a barn. It's a really good barn location for this property too. Anyway, and don't, like, if first you're on a homestead, if the garden's in the wrong place, just garden where the garden is in the wrong place while you learn the land and figure out where the right place is. But you'll find in that first year that you're walking around to certain places, you got to observe that, right? So too many new homesteaders try to make the existing infrastructure or systems work, and they may or may not have been designed well. If you get one that was designed well, then it's fine. But that old house or random fences or legacy garden spot can end up with lots of wasted time. And if you can get an objective advisor in out of the chute, I think that really can help you design from scratch based on what works, not what exists. And then get real with yourself about, well, yeah, but actually the pond is there and I'm not moving the pond. There are just some things you're just going to design around, and that is what it is. But first say, like, what would I have done? And then say, okay, what am I going to do? And which of these pieces am I sitting there? Because I really should have moved my garden in year 3, probably. 2, the one thing you can do that's never going to make you sad is build your soil from the beginning. Start your Johnson Su bioreactor compost system. Take Jack's class. Learn how to do that. Come out here next time we do a demo of it. Learn how to do that. It's actually really easy. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it makes a huge difference. That and biochar here are the things that made the biggest differences in the last few years. After, beyond grazing, like the rotational grazing is huge too. And observe before you build anything permanent. So you'll think like, I want to do these rotational paddocks and all of these things. Do that with temporary fencing. And then if you get to a point where a temporary fence is there all the time, that's where you put your permanent fencing. And then you can figure out how to make it more efficient for yourself. But that smartest first year move you can do is don't do too much and really focus in on what is this land really like, and really getting to know your land, and again, building that soil. 3, one system at a time. I am not kidding. It is the biggest mistake we make because we're so enthusiastic to do all the things. And for me, zone 0 is the most important zone. That's your home. If you make your home functional inside first while you're observing the land, and not even worry about anything, but maybe making some compost, maybe having a few tomatoes, right? Maybe you want chickens for eggs. That's starting to add layers. If you get your home functioning well, zone 0, then that is your place of peace when things happen on the homestead. But also it makes it so when you have garden abundance, you have a system for how it comes into the house, how it gets processed through the kitchen into jars or dried or freezer or dinner, while also giving you space to make dinner, while also giving you space to have a storage system you can keep track of. You see, there's things in your house you're going to want to build out if you choose this lifestyle. You want a pantry. You want to have a kitchen that is appropriate for processing food, or an outdoor processing area, which is what I have. You want to have your house set up so that if the electricity goes out, you can still heat it. You can still get water. You see what I'm saying, right? If what you're really into is brainless TV at night to shut down, you want to have a place where you can do that. And you want to have a way that you can do that if the power goes out, if that's important to you. I don't know what's important to you. You know what's important to you. You and your family knows what's important to you. If you sit down and work those things out, you can really put some purposeful time into how my zone 0, how my house interacts with my zone 1. And then you get into the rolling things out. And that gives you time to observe your land, which actually all works together. Number 4, tap into that local knowledge and outside experts. And this is where community is so important. We get so into self-reliance and think I'm going to be alone on my land and blah, blah, blah. And I could just be here. And it's true. I can just be here as long as Tactical's here. I can just be here, right? But really, like if things go really, really wrong, can you really be here by yourself? No. You need the community. You need the band with community. And if you do that, and if you put purposeful time into that, into those relationships with the locals, then if everything goes right, it just goes righter with your community around you, right? Like in a year where, like, for example, I gave tomato plants to somebody whose tomato plants were outside during a frost after he had lovingly raised them from seedlings because he got busy at work and didn't get them in time when he got home. But he has tomatoes. He didn't have to buy the tomato plants for me. He's somebody who's helped me out a lot too. And likewise, the year I messed up and my tomatoes didn't get grown at all, my friend Carly was like, hey, I got like 50 extra tomato plants. You need them? So you see, like having that community resilience makes a big difference. And it comes with time. But you've got all these people around you, right? All of these people around you. And you can tap into then that local knowledge and not put in a 6-inch culvert when you need to put a 6-foot culvert in, because that dry creek ain't so dry when it rains a lot, right? So hearing the advice and taking the advice is also part of the thing, right? Pay the consultant when it counts. I'm really good at this now, and I bring consultants in when it's a big thing, just because I'm like, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm thinking about doing it. Actually, usually I let them come with the plan first, and then I show them my plan, right? And then we compare notes and we talk about why. I've also learned that when Tactical tells me the following phrase, this might be a terrible idea, usually it's a really good idea because he processes things visually. So like we're going to put the glamper actually where my old garden was. And I was like on my board, we have this board of like, this is a multiple day, like big thing that we need to change in order to move the direction we want to go here. And on there is like, set up the glamper in a rentable spot that's pleasant for somebody to be in, so I can put it on Airbnb or put it on HipCamp, and people can rent that, right? And come out and like hang out. But it needs to be somewhere where it's not like, and you're looking at the road, right? So, or right now, the glamper is looking at the swim spa, which is not the end of the world, but it's not great. So I was like, that garden space where we want to put the barn is not going to have a barn this year. So let's just put it there. Like it wouldn't cost that much to like toss down some gravel or whatever and get it done. And so we went up there together and we looked and we found a spot. And then later in the day, he's like, this is probably a terrible idea. And I'm like, oh, this is probably a really good idea. I'm going to listen. And he said, what if we moved that outbuilding, which is just a shed, like a shed on skids that you can move. If we did that, like there's power, there's water, there's gravel already. It's like already an RV spot. You could just back straight in there. And I was like, that's going to probably cost me $600 to $800 to move that shed. But that's a whole lot less impact than moving the fence, like all the other stuff we were going to have to do. So it's very likely that's what's happening, right? So, build those relationships, take advice. And when Tactical says this may be a terrible idea, listen really carefully because it might not be a terrible idea. Tactical saying at least 3.5-foot culverts is a baseline. Yeah. And maybe 2 of them. Okay. And then number 5, and this one is controversial for some people, and I don't care. Manage the energy, the spiritual energy, the emotional energy, and the environmental energy. Do not let the negative be there or stay there. Take it on at the beginning. Homesteading isn't just physical work. There's a spiritual signature from what you're doing. And when you tap into homesteading the way we're doing it regeneratively, right? You're tapping and you're working with nature. You're working with creation in the way things should be done, right? And you need to take control of that and get your property blessed or whatever you need to do to protect it and protect yourself so you don't have all that bad hitting you. And some of that bad may be in you. And that may mean you need to go start seeing a counselor to work through some of that bad stuff, right? This is an ongoing thing. I was talking to somebody about it earlier where I was like, yeah, I realized I needed to see a psychologist to work through, why do I always end up setting up, friendships this way? I always end up in this like weird codependent situation. Well, I'm the only one I can change. So I learned how to change that. And in order to learn how to change that, I needed a coach, just like you need a permaculture coach. Sometimes you need, a different kind of coach. Sometimes you're going to need a spiritual coach. Lots of ways to get that. Clear it, maintain the spiritual health, and set firm boundaries on your property and a firm intention of making it a peaceful, beautiful place of creation of regenerated food and all of the other things. And I think if you keep those 5 things in mind, you'll be in a good place. I'm going to run through them just, top because I kind of explained them. So 1, start with the big picture plan, not necessarily what's already there. So be willing to like get rid of those boundaries. 2, Tori says codependency coaches are rad. She is one. 2, build soil and observe before you really do anything permanent. While you're doing that, make sure you're rolling out one system at a time and it's fully functional before you add more, and start with zone 0, your house, which gives you time to observe. 4, tap into local knowledge and outside experts early. And then 5, manage the energy, the spiritual, the emotional, environmental energy of the property. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this show. We went longer than usual, about a half hour longer. It's because I wanted to dump all of the bad stuff on you before we went to the good part of the show. So I wanted you to understand where I was coming from and how, like that first decade of homesteading, I did a lot wrong. I did some things right. And once I discovered permaculture and regenerative farming practices, even though I'd kind of tapped into it, once I really understood what was going on, it made a huge difference. And then once we dealt with the energy issue, it made a huge difference, right? So you can get there. You can do it by yourself. You can do it with people. If you're doing it by yourself or with people, also tap into the other people around you. Whether it's people in the Living Free in Tennessee community, you can join our Telegram group, which is LFTM group on Telegram, or on Facebook, it's the Living Free in Tennessee coffee break group. Like, Tori, who's here, she's in Washington State. Like, we've tapped into each other for help multiple times because she's in the community, right? So you don't have to necessarily be next door, but also find the ones next door and don't like be like, oh, I can't talk to you because we're not politically agreement. No, if you're like all aligned around the core premise of regeneratively raised food, we have a big bunch of people here in my community who do that, and they come from different backgrounds, different religious perspectives, different political perspectives, and if we go down any of those roads, I guess it's funny because they used to have a religious chat night here where everybody from all perspectives came and talked, and it was really kind of cool. In the intervening years with the division that's happened culturally, that's not possible right now, I don't think, but it should be possible. So find a way to make that possible, because also by having those discussions, you learn new things and find new pathways. So there's that. But also don't use that as your filter, because you're going to find an old dude who's the opposite of you politically, who knows how to grow the crap out of a tomato in your area without getting the blight. And you're going to want to tap into that. And most of the other stuff politically does not really matter. So there we go. If you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in 2 ways. One, get your coffee at hollowroast.com. I'm in a Soldak mug today. Also, consider becoming a member. Head over to livingfreeintennessee.com to find out more. With that, guys, go out